What's going on? Welcome to Tech with Sean, and today we got this big box from Walmart that showed up, and I didn't really order much from them, so I'm pretty sure it's going to be one of their new 17-inch EVOO EVOO laptops or whatever. This is the 17-inch one with the i7 and RTX 2060, so let's get it unboxed and see what it's like. This looks like it has the exact same box as the Overpowered laptop did. Now, if you saw the Overpowered laptop review, you may remember it had a similar fire style packaging design. So this, I'm guessing, is going to be real similar. I think it's built on the same Tongfang chassis. This has the specs right here. We got a RTX 2060 6GB. This is not the Max Q. i7 9750H, 16 gigabytes of DDR4 at 2666, full HD 1080p 144 Hz monitor, RGB backlit mechanical keyboard, 1 terabyte PCIe SSD, and Windows 10. So, let's open it up and see what the unit's like. Y'all, this looks exactly like the Overpowered laptop. So in here we have our power brick and the cable for it. We have a small package of screws. This is probably for mounting a 2.5-inch drive in the empty bay. Some warranty information. A quick start guide. Explains just what all the buttons and everything are. And then you get a free copy of PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds. That's pretty cool. Okay, so we got some protective plastic. You can see it has a brushed metal kind of look on the top, exactly like the 17-inch Overpowered laptop. As far as the connectivity goes, on the back here, we have the power. You have a USB-C. I don't believe this is Thunderbolt. HDMI, you got too many display ports. Over on the right hand side, you have an SD card reader and 2 USB 3s. On the left hand side, you have a Ethernet jack, USB port, and then a microphone and headphone jacks separate. Opening up the inside, there's something from THX. So they partnered with THX to make this line of laptops. This says, this device features THX spatial audio technology, blah blah blah. I've heard that you need to run this THX app to get good sound. I've heard people complaining about the sound. I know on the Overpowered ones you had to run that Sound Blaster Connect app to get good sound. So we're going to play around with some stuff and make sure that we get this sounding right. Got some other protective plastic junk in here. Alright, so there she is. Mechanical keys. These are brown switches, they say. They're not as loud and clicky as the Corsair keyboard I have with brown switches, but they're really pretty decent as far as laptop keyboards. Here's a closer look. You can kind of see the amount of travel on the keys. Inside, this is kind of a rubbery finish. The trackpad is not glass or anything real fancy, but you know, it's serviceable. This little dot up here, when the laptop's on, you can double click this to either enable or disable the trackpad, and that can help with palm rejection. If you're trying to type, you can just totally turn it off and not have to worry about that. Or if you're gaming and you use a dedicated mouse. Got the camera up here at the top. Again, this is the kind of brushed display. The logo, if you ask me, it looks a little nicer than the Overpowered logo, and it's a lot smaller. So if you do want to throw a sticker or something over there, just about anything you want is going to cover it. Now I'm going to get this thing charged up and updated, and we'll see what it can do. Alright, I got this thing up and running. We're downloading some games, and I just had a few quick impressions or notes. It's definitely an IPS screen. I know that it didn't specifically list it in some of the stuff, but you can tell from the viewing angles that it's definitely IPS. The keyboard is pretty nice. You can go in and customize it per key however you want. The presets are pretty cheesy. There's like a rainbow wave that's okay, but some of the others are pretty bad. Trackpad, it's nice and big. It's not the most responsive when you go to like push it in all the way to click, but it's pretty good if you tap to click, if you know what I mean. And 2 fingers, you know, you can just tap with 2 fingers to right click, and that works better, I think, than trying to push all the way in. I don't know, that's just my quick impressions. Also, right out of the box, the audio did sound pretty tinny. Let me show you how I remedied that. You want to open this THX Spatial Audio app, and you're gonna get this screen. Now what you want to do, by default it's set for THX Spatial Audio up here. You want to turn that off and turn it on to THX Stereo. Down here at the bottom, you want to turn this on and turn this all the way up to 100. And then most of these presets I thought sounded pretty lame, so I went ahead and did custom and made my own levels with the levels turned up a little higher, and that's made the audio noticeably louder. Also, up here in the corner, you want to make sure that you have this set for the speakers. You can pick speakers or headphones, but if you're using the built-in speakers, you want to have that on speakers. So that was my quick run through of what I'm doing for the audio. Alright, now let's get into some games. First up, we got Forza Horizon 4. We're running this at 1080p and ultra settings, and this did 100 frames per second. Actually, it did 101, and when I wasn't recording with NVIDIA Shadowplay, it did 107. So that's going to really let you take advantage of this high refresh display without having to dial down your settings a whole bunch, and it's going to give you a really great experience for playing this game. Next we got Red Dead Redemption 2, and this is one of the newest big games that's out, and this really takes a pretty good setup to be able to run it very well. You can see we have a mix of all types of different settings going here, and the end result was, in the benchmark at least, it gave us pretty close to right around 60 frames per second. Again, we are recording with Shadowplay, so we could probably get a couple more frames when we're not recording. This is pretty nice though, and since this laptop has a 144Hz display, if you wanted to, you could use Rivatuner to limit the frame rate to 48, and that's exactly 1/3 of 144, and you can dial the settings up a little more if you want it to look nicer. and play at a solid 48 frames a second instead of 60. But the RTX 2060 seemed to do a pretty good job keeping up in this game. It seemed to do a lot better than the 1060 in the overpowered 17-inch, that's for sure. Here we have one of the most taxing parts of the benchmark. This is where you're riding through Saint Denis, and you can see that it keeps the frame rate around 60 the whole time. It does drop below it a little bit a couple of times, but it's a pretty strong showing for this mobile GPU. With these settings, we ended up averaging 62.5 frames per second in the Red Dead 2 benchmark. Next we got Far Cry 5, and we're also running this at 1080p Ultra. This is another game that takes a pretty decent setup to run. It's a couple years old, but still, if you have a low tier kind of rig, you're gonna be struggling. But anyways, this is pushing it around 90 frames a second, and that's going to be a really good experience. If you wanted to, you could limit the frame rate probably to 72. That's another good one for these displays. That's exactly half the refresh rate, so you're going to see each frame exactly twice, and it gives you a really smooth experience, sometimes smoother than if you're jumping around in the 80s and 90s, in my opinion. Anyways, this was quite a strong showing for the system, and I thought it performed really well in this Far Cry 5 benchmark. Here you can see we averaged 91 frames per second. Next up is Assassin's Creed Odyssey. We're running this one at 1080p very high settings, and this is a real system melter. It's pretty tough to get over 60 frames per second in this game, especially in the benchmark. You can see here we're getting about 55 frames per second, 55 to 60, and that's pretty good. That's going to be a playable experience when you get into the game. And if you want to, I would suggest turning down the volumetric clouds, because that has a big impact on the GPU for some reason. I'm not exactly sure what was going on with this benchmark, but if you look up there, neither the CPU or the GPU are fully saturated, so neither one of them is really being taxed all the way. But yeah, I don't know. I've noticed that on my desktop on my 2080 Ti, a lot of times it only hits like 94% utilization, even when it's the bottleneck. So this is just not the best optimized game, but it has a good benchmark to compare against other systems, so I wanted to throw it in here. And you can see we averaged 61 frames per second. And lastly, let's take a look at Battlefield 5. Now this one, went into the options. We have everything maxed out. This is on Ultra settings, and we have the ray tracing reflections on Ultra. So for the 2060 at 1080p, Ultra ray trace reflections, and it held up better than I thought it would actually. I thought I'd have to drop the ray tracing down to medium or something to get, a good playable frame rate. But this was playing around 60 frames per second ultra'd out. I picked this level because I know it's one of the most demanding of the single player levels. And you can see here we're dropping frames a little bit, but really it's totally playable. And if you were to drop things down to high maybe, or very high instead of ultra, you probably get a big boost in the frames, especially if you drop the ray tracing down to high. But for such a demanding game with the ray tracing turned up, I was actually quite surprised that the 2060 laptop version did this well. Alright y'all, well that was a look at the 17-inch EVOO Gaming Laptop. My verdict, if you find this on the rollback pricing where they have it for $9.99 or even $10.99, this thing is a total steal. The screen is really nice, the speakers are okay, the trackpad is okay. Really, for that price point, nothing is going to come close. None of the budget laptops are going to touch a 2060. None of the budget laptops are going to have a screen like this. So if you find that deal on it, go ahead and snag it. It's really just a lot like all of the other things built in this Tongfang chassis, whether it's from electronics or the overpowered laptops from last year or wherever else. They're all really similar. If you're interested in any upgrades, I'm going to do a separate video where I install a 2 terabyte SSD in the empty 2.5 inch drive bay in here, and as well as opening up the laptop, so make sure you're subscribed to check out that follow-up video. If you like this video, give us a like, make sure you're subscribed to the channel, and we'll see you next time.